Hey, campfire crew, let's get it on. Accidentally Summoned a Spirit in the Woods by Diordan99. The story takes place in November of 2022. At the time, I drew a special elk tag in the Beaverhead mountain range of central east Idaho. I had hunted in this area many times before over the years, and I know the area like the back of my hand. It became a place of comfort and good memories. It still is, but I haven't looked at it the same since the story I am about to tell. I planned a week-long trip for the first week of November and took one of my best friends with me. We spent the first 4 days hiking up and down various ridges, chasing elk and having a blast. The nights were spent storytelling and eating soup by the stove. And mind you, it was November in Idaho, so it was very cold. It was the 4th night of the trip. It had snowed during the day and a fresh layer of snow lay on the ground. The sky had since cleared up, and a very cold but still and quiet air had settled in. My friend and I had gotten into a deep discussion about the Bible, spirits, cryptids, skinwalkers, etc. I should note that my friend had at the time been experiencing a decline in his mental health, and it was not uncommon for him to sometimes behave erratically. This will be relevant later in the story. During that conversation, I felt an intense fear kind of settle on me. It almost felt like the air had become tense. I had the urge to change the discussion into something else. But that's when it happened. Within 20 or 30 yards of the tent, what I thought at first was a coyote began yipping and barking very, very loudly. I looked at my friend, who became excited and told me to grab my gun so we could go look for this thing. It was strange, though, and something didn't feel right. The animal, whatever it was, didn't exactly sound like a coyote. It almost shrieked as opposed to yipping the way coyotes do, and it would occasionally bark and at times almost scream. I'm also an experienced outdoorsman, and any other hunter knows a coyote would not approach a tent in the middle of nowhere and draw attention to itself. It continued to vocalize for about 3 to 5 minutes at a time, circling the tent from a distance. I reluctantly grabbed my rifle and my spotlight and started looking for this thing. As I stepped about 10 yards away from the tent, I heard it again directly in front of me, shrieking and barking. I shined my light directly at it. I could see probably 150 to 200 yards in front of me. Yet nothing was there. No eyes shining in the light, no outline of an animal or person, nothing. After repeating this same scenario 3 or 4 times, we gave up and went back to the tent to warm up. But the sound didn't stop. At one point, when it was silent, my friend poked out his head of the tent and yelled, "Hey, shut up!" He was immediately answered with a scream from the animal. At other times, it sounded like it came from above the tent in the tree we were camped under. I tried playing it off as a coyote or maybe a hunting dog that got lost, but I could not convince myself it was either of those, and we ignored it for the rest of the time. It slowly started going further and further away from the tent, until it finally stopped about an hour or so later. The next morning, I looked around the area for tracks, yet to my surprise, I found nothing but our own. We didn't talk about it for the rest of the trip, and a few days later we went home. Now, I don't know if it's at all related, but about 3 months after this, my friend had a complete mental breakdown, and since then hasn't been on a hunting trip. Some in his family, they're very deeply religious, questioned whether he was a victim of some spiritual attack or something of that nature. I didn't correlate the two at the time, but in hindsight, I have so many questions about that night. Is it a coincidence that whatever animal appeared during that particular conversation, could it actually have been a coyote or a wolf? Why couldn't I see any eyes gleaming with my flashlight? Did this incident have something to do with my friend's mental decline? My friend would sometimes tell me and others about strange things he saw or heard. Was this related? If anyone out there has anything to point out, please share. My Haunted Cabin Story by Level Mushroom. The story happened in a cabin up in Utah that we stayed at during my mom's wedding. It's not too scary, but the end still sends chills down my spine. My mom Airbnb'd 3 cabins and a lodge on an estate for our family to stay in during the days before and after her wedding, so we could all be close together. The first 2 cabins were connected, but you couldn't get from one cabin to the other without going through the front door. These held my aunts and grandmas. The last cabin was for my mom and dad. The cabins all had the same design, a downstairs with 3 bedrooms, a kitchen, a living room, and a bathroom, also a small laundry room. There was an upstairs that was more like a loft. It was a small area with 3 beds, a couch bed, and a small bathroom. My parents' cabin is the cabin I spent most of my time getting ready in and relaxing in. I had always thought that the cabins were kind of eerie, and my parents' was a little bit more scary than the others. If you walked up the stairs, directly to your right was a bathroom, and that's where I saw it. I was touching up my hair, and in the corner of my eye, I saw something peering into the restroom from the stairs. I got slightly scared, but for reasons I thought I was just imagining it. But later, while sleeping on the couch, and my sisters were in 2 of the beds on the opposite side of the bathroom, I swear I saw something peering through the rungs of the stairs. I don't know what made me not scared, and I just ignored it. A couple of weeks later, I was sitting at the table eating dinner, and the topic of the paranormal came up. I brought up this incident, and my mom asked if it had happened in her cabin. And I said, yeah. And she responded by saying how when they did a tour of the cabin, the owner had mentioned that others had reported something like an entity in that specific cabin. Whether it's haunted or not, I'm now about 99% sure what I saw was not a figment of my imagination. Something of note, too. I wear a fitness watch, and it tells me when my heart rate gets too high, and it also tells me when my heart rate is getting close to too high. At the moment my mom mentioned it, it told me that my heart rate was getting close. Again, this might not be scary to most, but it definitely startled me. Kidnapper Decided to Hit Me Up Again by Mango Sperm. Warning, the following story contains sexual assault and rape imagery. I've held off from telling this story to anyone else besides close friends, as it wasn't big in the news, but it was fucked up, and reading other stories has given me the oomph to share. When I was 14, and I'm 23 now, I was naive and dumb, and my need for attention was at an all-time high. I had been abused, was alone, and hardly had friends because I wasn't allowed to hang out with my friends except in school. I discovered Omegle, as most teens did in the mid-2010s. I met a guy from Missouri, and he claimed to be 20. His name was Noble. We talked, and my birth giver found out and kept making steps to keep me from talking to him. But I was stubborn and thought he loved me, so our relationship went on. I was taken from my home and put in a safe house to protect me from being exploited. But the thing is, I still had access to a cell phone, Wi-Fi, and anything on the internet. So, Noble and I kept talking, and I found out that he was not in fact 20, but was 31. I was delusional and was like, oh, that's fine, because again, I believed he loved me, and only loved me. I was in and out of lots of youth homeless shelters and programs, but was then placed back with my birth giver for a short amount of time, but then taken away again and given to my biological father. When he found out about this man, he tried to prevent me from talking to him as well. It worked for a while as I was in therapy and on meds. And after we moved, I was taken off the meds and was out of therapy. And I started acting up and reaching out to Noble again. Well, I was removed from my biological father's home due to his and my behaviors, and I was placed in a group home. I was then 15. My third week there, I ran away and told Noble to come pick me up. He drove 16 hours as I stayed hidden in some random lady's house I met at a gas station. He arrived and we started heading back to Missouri. While we were in Pennsylvania, driving from the southern tier of New York, I was playing on his phone and I saw that he got repeated messages from a few girls' accounts on Snapchat. I asked him about it, and he came clean that he had been doing the same thing with other girls that he was doing with me, the calls, sharing of nudes, etc. I started crying and told him to either bring me back or drop me off on the side of the road and that I would find my way back. He just said no, then proceeded to pull the car over and choke me until I was unconscious. I was 5'6" and 111 pounds and anorexic at that time, and he was well over 200 pounds, something about 5'10"-ish. I don't know how long I was out, but it was long enough for him to find a hotel, check us in, and get me into a room without someone noticing. I woke up to him on top of me, raping me. The rest of the trip was kind of a blur, but we ended up finally reaching his apartment, and I asked to see his phone so I could play a game. His dumb ass gave me the phone, and I texted my grandma and my birth giver on Messenger, saying that I loved them, and if they didn't hear from me, I was in Missouri. After multiple times of being raped, forced to take pictures for other disgusting individuals, and forced to act like I was happy, just so I could live, the FBI and Missouri State Police busted down the door and handcuffed him. They took me to a car and him to another one. They took all of his computers, hard drives, etc., and I was brought to the juvie, then transferred to the mental ward for weeks because I said I wanted to die because of all this happening. Then I was transferred back to the juvie, a ward of the state. Instead of being treated like a kid who was groomed and raped and kidnapped, I was treated like a criminal. I was in Missouri for a month before I was put on a plane and sent back to New York, where I was quickly put into a residential home. Noble was sentenced to 30 years for what he did to me and other girls my age. I tell this story now because he randomly found my Instagram recently and started trying to reach out to me again from prison. I told him he was disgusting, that I wasn't a naive kid anymore, and that he needed to leave me alone. He got the message the first time, thank fuck, but he should have never been able to reach out. I keep my eye on where he goes, but it seems he's either working his years off, or he's been getting less time somehow because his years have dropped from 30 to 26. So, Noble, if you're on your little prison tablet and somehow are aware of this, I hope we never meet again. Her name was Rachel, by Rachel. I was walking to my sister's college dorm in the dead of night at 2 a.m. after finally parking my car in a remote lot. I'd had a long plane and car journey riddled with bumps in the road only to arrive here at this ungodly hour. The campus was empty because a recent ice storm had frozen everyone in. The crackle of ice and crunch of my feet was the only sound as I hiked my heavy backpack higher on my shoulder. I was carefully shuffling alongside the road, trying to avoid slipping and guided by the glow of spare streetlights. After a few minutes of walking and some misdirection, I located the entrance to the dorm, a little concrete entryway with a porch light in the darkness. As I was texting my sister to come down and let me in, the blue and red of flashing police lights caught my eye. No siren. The cop car slowly pulled by the curb, and an indistinct man in a uniform stepped out. Nobody else was there, so was he there for me? Did I look suspicious or homeless, like a lost girl due to the backpack? It was possible he was checking up on me due to that. However, he walked up to stand near me and said nothing, seemingly waiting for something. I clutched my phone, feeling the slight anxiety of a police officer turning his lights on but addressing nothing, and the slight anxiety of a human's proximity without addressing the other human being. I swear I could feel eyes on me. Hi, can I help you?" I asked abruptly, turning to look him full in the eye while taking a tentative step back. He said, "I'm looking for a girl that went missing in the area. What's your name and what are you doing here?" I said, "Oh, I'm Rachel. My sister's coming down to get me." I said that with a mind to suddenly make a call, gripping my phone even tighter with the screen unlocked. Was I somehow being suspicious? Why was he being so weird? Then I added, "I'm staying with my sister for the weekend." He said nothing. He just kept standing there. "So," I said, "someone's missing on campus? That's awful." I wondered if my sister could know who it was, or how somebody could even go missing on a campus in such a safe town. And then I asked him, "What's the girl's name?" He said, "It's Rachel. You look like her." I replied, "Wow, that's a coincidence. Well, it is a common name around here." Still, silence from him. I caught the welcome sight of my sister coming down the stairs, and she buzzed me in, and I realized that the officer was coming into the dorm with my sister's buzz in too. What did he need to do there so late at night? Was the girl missing from this building? "Good luck," I called to him after greeting my sister, referring to the missing girl. He had already begun to walk away, so the entreaty was to his back. No acknowledgement in return to me, and the guy slipped past the stairwell and into another area of the dorm. So strange. We ran up the stairs and I locked my sister's door behind me, both locks. I explained that the cop was looking for a girl missing on campus and asked if my sister knew any other Rachels. She said no. After settling onto the couch, I Googled missing girl Rachel, insert town name here, and started to shake when I came across an article of a local cold case with the picture of a missing girl who bore no true resemblance to me, but had the same awkward innocence in her expression that I did. A sort of dorky, kind look in her eyes that struck me. Her name was Rachel? The officer had said her name was Rachel. He also said I looked like a missing girl. Maybe I did, but how does an adult college girl go missing on such a small campus? It would have been all over the news if a young woman had genuinely gone missing. But as I checked in periodically, nothing ever made headlines. Coincidence or not, benign or not, exhausted or not, the entire strange incident spooked me and made me wary of walking alone so late at night. Crime is all about opportunity. In my gut, I knew that something was wrong. What would have happened if my sister hadn't showed up so quickly? Creepy Camper at Canadian Campsite by Julu. Fair warning, this is slightly long and a slow burn. But 5 years on, I still get creeped out thinking about this encounter, and whether it could have ended very differently. This occurred a few years ago in 2019 whilst my partner and I were taking a road trip across British Columbia, Canada. We'd rented a car from Vancouver and were just making our way towards Banff, up to Jasper, then back towards Vancouver via Whistler, a little counterclockwise loop. All in, we traveled for around 5 weeks total, sleeping in national park campsites or rest stops along the way. One evening, somewhere along the Crow's Nest Highway between Paulson and Castlegar, we arrived at a provincial park campground where we intended to stay the night. A nice, easy spot next to a lake with a large parking area, many benches, and a wooden shelter, but far from any civilization. There were already a few other people there with motorhomes and caravans. We were the only ones with a tent. We arrived before dark and set the tent up, sharing a few polite greetings with the other campers. There was one guy in particular, an old chap I would guess to have been in his late 60s, with a motorhome who was very friendly and chatty, but a little too chatty. He noticed we had our coffee pot, maca, with us, and mentioned that he had a 5-kilogram bag of coffee beans in his motorhome if we wanted some, though he followed up by saying he didn't even drink coffee because he didn't like the taste. He persisted in offering for us to come to his motorhome to get these beans. That sounded a little odd, and we politely declined. Eventually, he left. We got our tent pitched, and we went to prepare dinner in the on-site shelter. My partner and I shared a few glances with each other, and clearly neither of us felt particularly comfortable around that guy. But perhaps he was harmless. We kept our eyes open while we were cooking, and noticed that he'd wandered off towards the lake, presumably for a walk. While we were eating, we spotted him returning, trying to avoid being seen. We just avoided eye contact and got stuck into our dinner. Unfortunately, he spotted us and wandered over. Despite us being partway through eating, he began chatting with us. But being the type of people who never want to be rude or offend, we politely returned the conversation, nodded, and ate. I don't remember the whole conversation, but a couple of things stood out to us. He asked questions about our relationship. Were we married? Did we live together? Did we have children? Did we want to have children? Some questions bordered on being a little too personal. It could have been considered innocent coming from a relative or a friend, but coming from this stranger, we just felt some uncomfortable undertones to his questioning. He noticed we were drinking water with our meal and asked if we drank Coca-Cola. He mentioned that he had a multi-pack of Coke cans in his motorhome if we wanted some, though he said he didn't drink the stuff himself. He again persisted in inviting us to his motorhome to take a couple of cans each. We politely declined. At this point, my partner and I were sharing glances. We noticed that we both were feeling totally uneasy around this guy and quickly finished up dinner, made our excuses to get up and leave, and realized he wasn't going to leave us alone, so it was easier for us to just leave him there in the shelter. We cleaned up our cooking stuff, packed everything into our car, and prepared the tent for the night. Whilst doing so, this guy approached us again on his way back to his motorhome, and again invited us to come and get some Coca-Cola or join him watching TV if we wished to. Again, we politely declined. At that point, the light was fading, so we took ourselves down to the lake for a quick walk, brushing our teeth as we walked, rubbish bag in hand to dispose of in the bins at the bottom of the car park. As we approached the bins, we noticed a large, shadowy figure leaning into one of the bins. Startled by our presence, the figure jumped down from the bin onto all fours and ran from the tree line. Both my partner and I froze. There was no mistaking it. The large, cat-like silhouette with the long, slender tail. We just interrupted a mountain lion foraging through the bins. Thankfully, it was more afraid of us and made a run for the trees before we had even realized what we had seen. Startled, we both turned back and fast-walked it back up the hill, agreeing that we would instead sleep in the car that evening, not knowing whether that mountain lion would have been lurking nearby just behind the tree line or not, but we decided to not chance it. We reclined the seats, locked the doors, and slept until morning, thinking of the close encounter with the mountain lion and having put the creepy old camper to the back of our minds. In the morning, we woke early before anyone else, packed the tent, and got the hell out of there, heading for whatever town was next on the map, relieved to have left that entire scenario behind. We didn't bump into either the creepy old guy or the mountain lion again. Continuing on our journey, we wondered if perhaps we had misread the whole situation with the creepy old guy. But I like to think that our intuition is pretty good, and both of us sensed there was something off. Later that day, I received a call from my brother back home checking up on us and making sure we were okay. He'd seen on the news that there was a manhunt underway in BC after a spate of killings that week, and naturally he was concerned for us. It turns out there were 2 guys on the run after murdering 3 people further north towards Alaska. The suspects didn't resemble the old guy we met in any way, but it did make us wonder what his intentions were. Thinking back to that experience, we wonder if we overreacted, whether this creepy camper was just some harmless grandpa looking for company and conversation, or perhaps we were fortunate and avoided a much different fate. Trust your gut if something doesn't feel right. I'm curious to hear anyone's thoughts on this situation and whether we should have handled it differently. Stranger at Our Window by Anonymous. Not sure if this is enough interaction to constitute an encounter, but it was weird. About 4 years ago, my family moved from our English local rural village to a slightly busier local rural town. In the village, we knew absolutely everybody, but in the town, we knew way less. The new place was a townhouse, and if it wasn't creepy enough that we lived opposite a graveyard, next to that graveyard is the huge walled-off grounds to an old hospital asylum. It's also worth mentioning that that town is known to be pretty dangerous, and was actually known as the murder town of the UK for several years. That being said, apart from a few run-ins in college, I never felt particularly vulnerable there. We moved in late November, and so by Christmas we had only lived there for a few weeks. My ex and I came home for the holidays and spent a few nights at my parents' and then hers. One night, my parents were in the living room and my ex and I were arguing, but we wanted to talk things out discreetly, so we went upstairs to my parents' room. It was about 1 a.m. As we were arguing, I felt this weird sensation and randomly glanced at the window to the street. Everything seemed normal at first until I saw somebody, dressed all in black, standing completely still in the old hospital grounds, just staring directly at our window. I couldn't make out any features of theirs, just that they were white. Once my ex realized that I had stopped arguing and was visibly creeped out, she too looked and was like, "What the fuck?" Something instantly felt wrong, and I didn't respond. I was looking to see if maybe the person had a dog they were walking, but after a couple of minutes I realized they hadn't moved a muscle. Where they stood, the only thing at normal eye level to them would have been the wall surrounding the grounds, though they were clearly facing up at our window. And anyway, who walks their dog at 1 a.m. in the middle of English winter? I told my ex to move away from the window for some reason, and whoever it was stood there for 15 minutes straight, staring directly up at the window, not moving at all. And I stared back, completely frozen the whole time, just studying everything about the situation, trying to make sense of it. Eventually, I moved away from the window and told my dad. He double-checked that everything was locked and told us to just sit with them for a bit. About an hour later, curiosity got the better of me and I checked the window again. Whoever it was gone. My partner had been arguing for well over 20 minutes before I noticed. Had that person been watching us the whole time? Bizarre Notes from a Secret Admirer by Glitter Sparkles. When I was a freshman in high school, Alyssa was my role model. Alyssa was a senior. She was so gorgeous, confident, smart, effortlessly stylish, and always owning the room. Back then, I was too shy to talk to her. Seniors are already pretty intimidating to freshmen, but Alyssa was next level intimidating because she was such a queen. I didn't expect anyone to see me the way I saw Alyssa, but I was pleasantly surprised in my senior year. That year, I started finding cute little notes in my locker. I wasn't expecting that at all, but I was really flattered. The first one said, "You were beautiful in that dress on Friday." The handwriting was neat and simple, with a cute little heart at the end. More notes kept coming, always in the fourth period. I got a note every week or two. I know they came during the fourth period because I checked my locker before and after every class. All the notes were really sweet. They said things like, "Your smile lights up the hallway. You shine brighter than any star." Or, "Your homecoming photos are straight out of a magazine cover. So stunning." There were more notes that I don't remember, and they weren't romantic or flirty. They looked like things I might have said to Alyssa if we'd ever spoken. I thought maybe they were from a shy underclassman girl, and I had my suspicions. I didn't tell anybody about the notes. I really didn't want my friends turning this into an investigation and embarrassing whoever was leaving them. Whoever was leaving these messages, I thought they meant well. Then, in the second semester, my schedule changed. My last class of the day was upstairs near my friend's locker. My friend's last class was near my locker. So we swapped lockers. I forgot all about the notes until my 18th birthday. That morning, my friend handed me a note she'd found in my old locker, and it said, "Happy birthday, princess." At first, she thought the notes were meant for her, since any of those compliments could have fit her too. But when she realized the birthday didn't match up, she put two and two together. Come to think of it, I don't think any of the notes ever said my name. I admitted that the notes had been happening all year and explained that I didn't want to make a big deal about it. Then my friends launched their investigation that I'd been worried about. All the girls in our friend group became detectives trying to solve this mystery. One friend who didn't have a fourth period class stationed herself by the lockers to survey the area, and it worked. The notes weren't from a shy freshman or even from a boy. They were from a janitor, an older woman none of us knew. We all recognized her, but I don't think any of us had ever talked to her. She'd been leaving these notes for several months, watching me closely enough to comment on my outfits, field hockey games, and even what I posted on Facebook. I saw her at the last field hockey game of the season. She sat quietly in the stands, and that was the only time I noticed her watching me, but I have no idea how I hadn't noticed her watching me before. None of us brought it up to her. She hadn't done anything wrong, but it still felt unsettling in a way that's hard to explain. Uncle Josh note, "Yeah, you know what? Damn, is that creepy. Creepy old janitor lady. Ugh." Hey gang, thanks for listening to this episode of Uncle Josh's True Scary Stories. If you have a true scary story of any nature that you'd like to hear narrated on this channel or my podcast, email it to UncleJoshTrueScaryStories@gmail.com. I read them all. If you could do me a favor and you've enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up, tell your friends about it, and maybe even become a subscriber. Follow me on social media, links to that are in the description. And if you'd like to take your support of this channel even further, find a link to my Patreon page, or consider purchasing some Uncle Josh or Campfire Crew merchandise. A link to my TeePublic storefront is also in the description. Make great Christmas gifts, guys. Okay, that was cheesy, but I had to say it. As I am posting this, we've got a heck of a storm going on here in my area. Not as bad as the folks about 25 miles and farther south than me, where they've gotten about 2 feet of snow, but I thought it would be apt to have scary stories for a snowstorm. Hope you're warm and toasty wherever you are. Everyone, be excellent to each other, and until next time, be wary of things that go bump in the night. It could be anything. A ghost, a monster, or the guy next door.